This video is brought to you by Squarespace and their design intelligence. This jet isn't the fastest, it's not the most maneuverable, it doesn't have a large combat radius, and it was almost cancelled several times. But this jet might be the best bang for your buck in the world today and one of the deadliest 4th gen fighter jets out there. This is the 3rd installment in our story about Swedish jets and might just be the most interesting one. Join me today to hear the story of how an aircraft sent its test pilot into retirement, how it was hated by politicians, and why it is one of the key pillars of Sweden's defense. This is the JAS 39 Gripen. Welcome to the 1970s. ABBA is dominating the charts, IKEA is spreading across the world, and Sweden, once again, needs a new fighter jet. Now, if you're familiar with the story so far, you might be asking yourself, why does Sweden need a new jet? Hasn't the Viggen just entered service in 1971? Well, the thing is, the Swedes had a very proactive approach to fighter development during the Cold War because fighters were the only means of putting a serious defense against the Soviet attack force in case of war. In previous iterations, the J-35 Draken and the JA-37 Viggen, both built by SAAB, were very innovative in their designs and followed the delta wing configuration with two very important requirements: easy and cheap to maintain, and had the ability to take off and land absolutely everywhere. And they meant it. And just as the Viggen development was started during the same decade that the J-35 Draken entered service, this was also the case with this new fighter as well, because trends were changing very fast during the Cold War, and if you wanted to be part of the big boy club, you had to work out hard. And I love the fact that you can tell when each jet was made thanks to its design language. The J-35 was designed and made during the pointy era. It was all about speed, interceptors, and robust jets. The J-37 was designed as a maneuverable aircraft that could merge and win a dogfight against anyone. And the next fighter was to be designed as a multi-role jet, because the Swedes were constantly catching up with the trends. In 1979, the Swedish government decided to sit down and review its original defensive plan, BAS 60. If you're not familiar with what this means, this was a plan to disperse aircraft all over the country in case of an all-out war with the Soviet Union. The government knew that air bases would be one of the first things to be targeted, so the idea was to hide aircraft everywhere that had the ability to take off from fields and roads, making it impossible for Sweden to be without air-to-air defenses. This new plan was creatively called BAS 90 and would have a new fighter procurement program, also creatively called Project 2105. This project included new specifications for a jet to take off from a 500 to 800 meter long and 6 meters wide strip of land or road in any weather conditions, including snow. The aircraft must also keep the simplicity and ease of maintenance, even by conscripts who have never even seen a jet before, as well as have the ability to come to a sudden stop on short surfaces such as a local road. And a new era also means a new demand for better maneuverability, fly-by-wire controls, and the ability to use modern weapons. But although the project was green-lit in 1982, voices in the government were not happy because of the cost of this program, and the fact that Sweden could simply go out and buy off-the-shelf F-16s, F-18s, or French Mirage 2000s instead. But all of that would go against one of the main policies of Sweden's military during the Cold War, self-sustainability, and thus they had no choice but to pull their head in and get to work building this dream jet. But a dream development it wouldn't be, even for Swedish standards. It was only in 1987 that the first prototype was ready to fly, but again, it was delayed 15 months because of issues with the fly-by-wire controls. In 1988, it finally took to the skies with only minor issues during the flight, but a year later in 1989, the pilot, Lars Reidstorm, lost control of the aircraft and crashed on landing approach. He wasn't able to eject in time, but somehow managed to walk away from the crash with only a broken elbow. The software of the jet was heavily updated with the help of an American company, and in 1992 a new prototype was ready again to continue the testing phase. But feeling like they were making too much progress, in 1993, during a display, a pilot lost control and crashed the aircraft, fortunately ejecting in time to save himself. And guess who the pilot was? Yes, that's right, Lars Radstorm again, who was able to walk away a second time. And after this incident, he realized that his luck had run out and he decided to retire from the Air Force. Usually the retirement age of test pilots is 50 years old, but he said, "I'm done pushing my luck, it's time to get out." In both cases, the crash was the result of pilot-induced oscillation, or in simple terms, pilot trying to control the aircraft and giving opposite commands in a short period of time. But before you write down in the comments pilot error, Lars wasn't actually the one to blame. The Gripen had a very sensitive control system, but with a slow response time. So once again, they had to improve the system to match the pilot. All of this was just perfect for politicians to start questioning the program, and a big debate started whether this program had any future at all and why the flight control issues weren't fixed. Fortunately, and just like the ability for test pilots to walk away, the program survived political assassination, and the jet would finally fix its flaws and enter service in 1997. And you must be now wondering, all this effort to create this jet, is it any good? The engineers designed this jet to deal with the problem of defending Sweden's airspace using new intelligent solutions, something that we hadn't seen from other aircraft from, say, Russia or the Americans. Pretty much an intelligent idea that maybe you can steal for your own with your business in 2025, like using Squarespace's new design intelligence. That's right, the amazing Squarespace website creator has combined 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with their own cutting-edge AI technology to give you your strongest creative potential. Squarespace will actually recommend a fantastic design to reach your goals with a beautiful, more personalized website that gives you a distinct digital identity. You never have to look like you're using a template again. But why stop there? Because building a website is only the beginning with Squarespace, because you can run email campaigns, get more customers, make more money, and even launch courses. That's right, if you want to teach, Squarespace is your new one-stop shop for all of your online university needs. And look, I put my money where my mouth is, and I use Squarespace to hold my own merch store, foundandexplained.shop. But you don't have to buy anything because you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you go to squarespace.com/found to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. The name of this aircraft stands for JAS, and that translates into Fighter Attack Reconnaissance, showing that this is a true multi-role aircraft. On the other hand, the name Gripen might sound familiar because it actually translates to Griffin. Not Peter from Family Guy, but a mythological creature that has a lion's body and an eagle's head. And you've got to admit that's quite a cool name for an aircraft. The Griffin is also on the manufacturer's logo of the SAAB Corporation. And just like its mythical roots, its design came from an evolution of an earlier incarnation. This aircraft would have a Delta Wing Plus canards configuration, a design that was well matured and studied in Swedish aviation circles, previously used on the Viggen. The aircraft is aerodynamically unstable, meaning it needs fly-by-wire controls to compensate for stability in flight. But on the other hand, this means that it has a much better maneuverability at transonic and subsonic speeds than any other aircraft. And this was a popular approach in Europe during the 1980s. Rafale and Eurofighter both followed this design, and even the Soviet 5th gen project, the MiG-MFI, had this aircraft design as well. A video, of course, that you can watch right now here on the channel. Now, on first sight, you might wonder about its engine because it looks awfully familiar. It's the Volvo RM12, but that is actually a license-built General Electric 404 engine. And if you don't know engines that well and you're just scratching your head, this is the same engine from the Hornet and the F-117 Nighthawk. And although it has a somewhat disappointing 82 kilonewtons of thrust on its afterburner, that is more than enough to push a small plane like the Gripen past Mach 2 and give it a solid thrust-to-rate ratio, and most importantly, a very good climb speed, even better than the F-16. The Gripen is also equipped with a pulse Doppler radar with a 120km range and standard NATO weaponry for the time. It was built in a single and twin-seater configuration under the A and B designations respectively, and later modernized to a C and D variant, which were standardized for NATO operations and export to other countries. One of the highlights of the Gripen and key requirement from the start was to be cheap to operate, and it is absolutely insane to see that 1 hour of flight time is only around $3,000 on the latest variants, and it's $5,800 for the CD variant. Honestly, I'm kind of thinking we should throw together a GoFundMe to send one of our team members up in one of these aircrafts if it's really that cheap. And when you compare that price to any, and I mean any other NATO fighter, the Gripen is by far the cheapest modern multi-role aircraft to field. And speaking of fields, do you remember that short takeoff and landing requirement? Well, the JAS-39 can take off from a 400-meter strip of land and land on a 500-meter one, which is quite impressive. And this was in line with the Swedish Air Force doctrine as a whole and their dispersed assets policy in case of war. Naturally, you might assume that such an impressive aircraft would be internationally popular. And although it's good on paper, it's been kind of sidetracked during the years when compared to the sexy-looking Rafale or the powerful Eurofighter, and has thus far remained out of the spotlight of many potential buyers. There were some initial export successes though. The Czech Republic and Hungary were first to lease the Gripen in Europe, and South Africa would actually buy 26 airframes in 1999. But soon after that, the Gripen started to prove itself in training and combat. In a red flag exercise in 2006, the Swedish Gripens blew away their opponents from the sky in simulated battles. During one exercise, a single Gripen managed to score a kill against 5 F-16s. And on a second occasion, it even scored a kill against 2 F-15s, all of that without a single loss. Gripens continue to dominate in other NATO exercises as well, and in 2011, the Swedish Air Force pushed for the first combat deployment in Libya to market the aircraft to the world, because whilst it was proving itself in use, the orders were still lacking. Because you see, by this point in time, the Gripen was becoming a little bit obsolete. It got so bad that in 2012, a Swedish Air Force pilot testified to the parliament that the current variant of the Gripen would be obsolete in air-to-air combat by 2020. Thus, they proposed a new upgraded version of this aircraft, and very quickly, 60 of the new Gripen E versions were approved. And this is almost a completely new aircraft in terms of capabilities. The Gripen E and Gripen F was first known as the Gripen NG, standing for New Generation, and it featured a complete overhaul of electronics and countermeasures along with implementing new weaponry. The new variant would be based on a newly built fuselage that would be slightly larger and powered by a new General Dynamic F414 engine from the Super Hornet. This new engine allowed for a 20% increase in thrust and gave the new variant a super cruise ability. That's the ability to fly supersonic without the use of an afterburner. The thrust to weight ratio is now over 1, and with canards and stability in flight, it allows for some amazing maneuverability if they ever got into a dogfight. 2 additional hardpoints were also added for weapons as well. And you know that the Swedes are going all out, with the Gripen becoming the first jet to feature the new state-of-the-art Meteor missile. Developed in a joint European program, it has a range of over 200 kilometers, powered by a ramjet engine. This missile is also paired with a completely new Raven AESA radar developed by Italian Leonardo. Now this radar is actually really cool, and normally I don't go this deep into them, but this one has the unique hybrid ability to use both mechanical and electronical scanning whilst in flight. This means that the Gripen does not only cover forward 120 degrees with its radar, but it can expand that further when the radar is slightly turned mechanically, meaning it can fly along the edge of enemy airspace while scanning deep inside that territory. The only other fighter in the world with this hybrid radar design is the Russian Su-35, but that features PISA, not ASA radar. And speaking about the Russians, the Gripen E features a completely new set of electronic countermeasures designed specifically to counter these new Russian radars and weapons. And it's not just the enemy that they're looking at, they're also looking at their American allies. This aircraft has the Skyward IRST, which is quite important in fighting stealth aircraft, as well as MFD screens in the cockpit like the F-35. Gripen pilots also have a Cobra helmet-mounted display systems to track targets and fire missiles off-board, and because the jet is so good with all these crazy new whiz-bang gadgets, they're now proposing an electronic warfare variant to help defend their skies. All this effort was finally recognized with Brazil and Thailand ordering the new Gripen E and F, and Sweden themselves ordering a total of 70 new airframes for their own air force. More customers might come with time because this aircraft, although expensive to buy, is extremely cheap to operate and is probably still the best bang for the buck out there. The Meteor missile paired with this new radar makes it extremely deadly for air-to-air combat, and Storm Shadow cruise missiles and a wide range assortment of air-to-ground weapons, including anti-ship missiles, make it a good option for any user. So if you're looking for new air defense, come on down to the IKEA of fighter jets, and you might even walk away with a bargain. So in all honesty, will this fighter jet see more success into the future? Well, let me remind you how Rafael had no orders for a long time until recently. So now the manufacturer, Dassault, is overwhelmed that they can't even fulfill the amount of orders in time. This very well could be the case with the Gripen as well, especially with geopolitics taking a sharp turn after the start of war in Ukraine, and many countries stopping to buy Russian aircraft. And in amazing tradition, Sweden is currently developing a next generation fighter, and it's scheduled for 2035, continuing that decades-long fighter development program despite being a rather small country in terms of population. And this aircraft is a testament to their will and ingenuity, and will keep defending the Swedish skies for decades to come. So please, Sweden, hurry up with the new fighter, because I can't wait to continue this story. Thank you for watching, and vi sen snart!